I told my grandparents that I don't have family. I don't know how much of the background I need to share for this, but I'll give you a rundown. My parents have an on and off marriage/relationship. I don't even know if they're legally married anymore. They've broken up more times than I can remember. Their story starts in high school, where they began this chaotic, on again, off again thing that stuck. And by stuck, I mean the inconsistency stuck. They got married when they were 19 or 20, divorced once, and remarried. All of this I know for sure. But honestly, there could be more breakups or even remarriages that I'm not aware of. They had me in their early 30s, and the on and off cycle didn't stop. This has been my entire life. There have been times I went several months, even over a year, without seeing one of my parents. Once, I didn't see my mom for around 13 or 14 months. Another time, it was my dad for about 11 months. Other times, it's been shorter, like 4 or 5 months, but still, I only saw them again when they decided to get back together, until the next breakup. Whether I saw my extended family depended on whether my parents were together at that time. The extended family all knew I sometimes went months without seeing one parent or the other. When I'd be upset about it, they would tell me to buck up or remind me that I was old enough to deal with it. I remember a few times when my parents' fighting got really bad and I felt like I needed to get out of the house. I'd ask family members directly if I could sleep at their place, but they always said no. Nobody wanted me around. It's like they saw me as someone else's problem, not theirs. In a lot of my parents' fights, the biggest argument wasn't about who wanted me, but who had to take me. They fought over that more than anything else. At one point, they were going through a divorce, again, and I still don't know if it was finalized or if they just let it fizzle out like they do with most of their issues. Not that it matters. They've been cycling through the same pattern my entire life. But things changed when I turned 14. That's when my two best friends, they're twins, and their family stepped in. Their parents have done more for me in 2 years than my entire family has in my whole life. They started by giving me babysitting jobs. I say babysitting jobs, but really, it's just me hanging out with the twins and getting paid for it. They've given me money just because they noticed I needed it. Like once, during another one of my parents' breakups, both of them forgot to give me money for school lunches. The twins' parents covered me without a second thought. When I mentioned the forgotten lunches to some family members, they just shrugged and said I could survive without lunch for a while. That's the kind of support I've had from my actual family. The twins' parents even helped me get a part-time job so I could have my own money. They helped me open a bank account that doesn't need an adult cosigner so my parents can't touch it. It's one of the best things anyone's ever done for me. I can't even put into words how much they've helped. Now to the current mess. Over the weekend, my mom's side of the family came to stay with us. I was forced to give up my room for my grandparents and had to sleep in the office. I pretty much locked myself away the whole weekend, except when I had to go to work. Then, on Sunday, my grandparents cornered me. They told me I was acting like a typical teen and that I should be enjoying time with my family instead of acting like a stranger. That was it for me. I told them I don't have a family. I have people who see me as a burden and who don't care about what happens to me. I said that's not a family, that's just a group of people forced to know me. They tried to dismiss me, telling me to stop acting like the whole world hates me. I told them I never said anyone hated me. I said they don't care. I told them I finally have people who care about me, and it's something I never had growing up. They made a huge deal out of it. By the time I got home Monday, my mom told me her parents had texted her to say I hurt their feelings and owed them and everyone else an apology. The thing is, they had to text her because they don't even realize I have a phone. The twins' parents bought it for me, and nobody in my family has the number. Not even my parents. And now, things are worse. My dad walked out after hearing about the argument, and he hasn't been back since. My mom's been alternating between guilt-tripping me and pretending everything's fine. The house feels emptier than usual, which is saying something. I've been retreating into my job and spending more time with the twins, but there's this looming sense that things are about to hit a breaking point. My mom keeps saying I need to apologize, and the extended family is probably gossiping about what a terrible, ungrateful kid I am. At this point, I'm just trying to focus on work, school, and the people who actually care about me. The twins' family is my real family, as far as I'm concerned. But there's this nagging feeling that this isn't over, and embracing myself for whatever fallout is coming next. The fallout from my weekend confrontation has been quietly spiraling, and I'm starting to see cracks where I didn't know they existed. It's strange how one conversation can pull at threads that were already frayed. It's been a few days since my mom told me I owed everyone an apology, and since then, it's like the air in the house has become heavier, tenser. My dad is still gone, and even though this isn't the first time he's walked out, something feels different about this one. Maybe it's because I've grown used to feeling disconnected from them. It's like they're distant stars I can see, but never touch. When I was younger, I used to think if I said the right things or acted the right way, it'd finally find the secret to keeping them both in the same room without shouting. But that's not how it works, is it? I've been spending a lot more time with the twins and their family lately. Their house is warm in a way mine has never been. I've even started keeping a few extra clothes and personal items there because I'm over so often. They joke that I've unofficially moved in, but the truth is, it's the only place I really feel at home. Their parents have been treating me like one of their own. They ask about school, remind me to eat, and even help me plan for my future, things my own parents rarely do. My mom, meanwhile, seems to be unraveling in her own way. She's been quieter than usual, which would be a relief if it didn't feel so ominous. It's like she's teetering on the edge of saying something explosive. Every now and then, she'll start a sentence with, "I just don't understand why you," but then trails off before finishing. It's frustrating, but at the same time, I don't really want to hear whatever she's struggling to articulate. The twins' mom, Mrs. Carter, asked me about it yesterday when I stopped by after work. "How's your mom doing?" she asked, her voice soft and filled with concern. I shrugged, not wanting to delve into it. But she's good at reading between the lines. "You know," she said, "sometimes people don't know how to handle the truth when it's put right in front of them. It's easier to lash out than to face it." I nodded, not trusting myself to say much. She's always been like that, dropping little bits of wisdom without making it feel like a lecture. I wish I could pack that kind of calm and bring it back home with me. Instead, I have to leave it behind every time I walk out their door. Back at home, things have been quieter, but not in a peaceful way. My mom keeps busying herself with meaningless tasks, reorganizing the kitchen cabinets, cleaning out closets that haven't been touched in years. It's her way of avoiding reality, I think. But every now and then, she'll pause and look at me like she wants to say something, only to shake her head and go back to whatever she was doing. The extended family has also been chiming, and a few of them have reached out through my mom, relaying messages that I need to reconsider my attitude or make amends. It's almost laughable how quickly they've rallied around my grandparents, the same people who barely acknowledged my existence growing up. I haven't responded to any of it. What's the point? They've made it clear where their priorities lie, and it's not with me. My part-time job has been a lifesaver, giving me an excuse to be out of the house more often. It's not the most glamorous gig. I stock shelves and sometimes help with inventory, but it's steady and it gives me something to focus on. Plus, the manager is cool and doesn't ask too many questions. One evening after work, I stayed late at the twins' house. We were sitting in their living room, half watching a movie, when their dad asked me about my plans after high school. "You've got good grades," he said. "Have you thought about college?" I hesitated. College has always seemed like this distant, almost unattainable goal. My parents have never brought it up, and I've always figured it'd be out of reach financially. But Mr. Carter's question made me wonder if it's not as impossible as it thought. "I don't know," I admitted. "I guess I haven't really thought about it much." He nodded thoughtfully. "Well, if you ever need help figuring it out, just let me know. There are options out there, even if your parents aren't in a position to help." His words stuck with me long after I left that night. It was the first time anyone had really talked to me about the future like it was something worth planning for. It felt good, but it also made me realize how much I've been coasting, just trying to get through each day without thinking too far ahead. The next day, things took a turn at home. My mom finally broke her silence, launching into a tirade about how I've embarrassed the family and how my behavior has been disrespectful. She brought up the argument with my grandparents, claiming that it blown things out of proportion and made everyone feel awkward. I didn't argue with her. I just stood there, letting her words wash over me. It's not like I haven't heard similar things before, but something about this time felt different. Maybe it's because I've started to realize I don't need her approval. Maybe it's because I know I have people who genuinely care about me, even if they're not blood related. After her rant, she stormed off to her room, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I stayed there for a while, staring at the table and wondering how much longer I could keep this up. Part of me wants to just leave, pack a bag, crash on the Carter's couch, and never look back. But another part of me knows it's not that simple. There's still school to finish, a job to keep, and a million other little things tying me here. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time. The twins family continues to be my lifeline, giving me a sense of stability I've never had before. But I can't shake the feeling that this chapter of my life is far from over. The tension at home is building, and it feels like something is going to break soon. I just don't know what that's going to look like or where it's going to leave me when it does. The tension at home has reached a boiling point. My mom is still oscillating between avoidance and confrontation, and the silences in the house feel louder than any of her outbursts. She's taken to slamming cabinet doors or stomping up the stairs, small acts of frustration that don't do much but make the atmosphere more oppressive. My dad, meanwhile, has still not come back, and the lack of any word from him has left an uncomfortable void. It's like we're all just waiting for something, what I don't know. An explosion? A resolution? My own approach to the chaos has been to avoid the house as much as possible. Between school, work, and the twins' house, I've managed to stay busy enough that I only have to come home to sleep. The Carters have continued to be my safe haven, and it's gotten to the point where Mrs. Carter packs me leftovers from their family dinners because she knows I'm probably not eating much at home. It's a kindness that doesn't go unnoticed, but it also highlights how bleak things have gotten on my end. It's like every small gesture from them is a reminder of what I don't have in my own family. School has been its own challenge. I've always been a decent student, but lately it's been harder to focus. Teachers have started to notice, asking if everything is okay, but I usually brush it off with vague assurances. There's no point in explaining what would they even do. Besides, I've gotten good at compartmentalizing, keeping my home life and school life as separate as possible. But the cracks are starting to show, and I'm not sure how long I can keep up the facade. Then there are the twins. They've been my anchors through all of this, but I can tell even they are starting to worry about me. One night, after we'd finished a marathon gaming session, one of them, Jake, brought it up. "Hey man," he started, his voice unusually serious. "You've been kind of quiet lately. Is everything okay?" I shrugged, not really wanting to get into it. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." He didn't buy it. "Is it your mom or your dad?" "It's just everything," I admitted after a long pause. "Things at home are getting worse, and I don't know how much longer I can deal with it." Jake nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know you can stay here if you need to, right? My parents wouldn't mind." I'd heard this before, but something about the way he said it this time felt different. It wasn't just an offer, it was a genuine plea. I nodded, mumbling a quiet thanks, but the idea of actually taking them up on it felt too big, too complicated. The next day, I went to work as usual, trying to push everything to the back of my mind. But even there, I couldn't escape the weight of it all. My manager, a laid-back guy named Chris, pulled me aside during my break. "You've been looking kind of burnt out lately," he said, leaning against the counter. "Everything okay at home?" I hesitated. Chris is cool, but I wasn't sure how much I wanted to share. "It's been rough," I admitted, "but I'm managing." He nodded, his expression sympathetic. "If you ever need to talk or take some time off, let me know, okay?" It was a kind offer, but the idea of taking time off felt impossible. Work was one of the few places where I felt in control, where I could focus on something other than the mess at home. Still, it was nice to know he cared. Back at home, things were as tense as ever. My mom's latest thing was trying to guilt me into spending more time with her side of the family. She had started leaving notes around the house, little passive-aggressive reminders about family loyalty and respecting your elders. One particularly pointed note read, "Family is the only thing that will always be there for you. Don't forget who raised you." I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. The irony was too much. The same people who had ignored me for most of my life were now trying to guilt me into prioritizing them. It was almost laughable. Things came to a head later that week. My mom's parents decided to drop by unannounced, likely to set things straight after our last confrontation. I'd just gotten home from work when they showed up, their faces set in grim determination. "We need to talk," my grandfather said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I sighed, too tired to fight. "About what?" "About your attitude," my grandmother chimed in. "The way you spoke to us last time was completely out of line." I bit back the urge to roll my eyes. "I was just being honest," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Honesty doesn't excuse disrespect," my grandfather shot back. "We're your family, and you need to start treating us like it." "Maybe if you'd treated me like family growing up, I wouldn't feel this way now," I retorted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The room went silent. My grandparents exchanged a look, their expressions a mix of shock and indignation. My mom, who'd been hovering in the doorway, finally stepped in. "That's enough," she said, her voice sharp. "Go to your room." I didn't argue. There was no point. I grabbed my bag and headed upstairs, slamming the door behind me. Once inside, I sat on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. The confrontation had left me shaken, but also oddly relieved. For once, it said what had been holding back for years. Still, the fallout was bound to be messy. My grandparents weren't the type to let things go, and my mom was clearly caught between defending them and dealing with me. I couldn't see how this would end without more fights, more guilt, more chaos. That night, I texted Jake, asking if I could crash at their place for a few days. His response was immediate. "Of course, come over whenever." I packed a small bag, throwing in enough clothes to last a few days, and slipped out of the house without telling anyone. As I walked to the twins' house, the cool night air felt like a small reprieve. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. When I arrived, Mrs. Carter was waiting for me at the door. She didn't say much, just pulled me into a hug and told me to make myself at home. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I did. The walk to the twins' house that night felt different. It wasn't just an escape, it was a decision. I'd spent my entire life treading water in the chaos of my parents' world, waiting for things to get better, for someone to choose me. But walking under the streetlights with my bag slung over my shoulder, I realized I was finally choosing myself. Mrs. Carter welcomed me at the door with her usual warmth. She didn't press for details, just handed me a plate of leftovers and told me to eat. The familiarity of their house, the faint smell of lavender, the hum of the dishwasher made my chest ache with relief. For the first time in days, I felt safe. Over the next few days, I settled into a rhythm at the Carter's house. It wasn't perfect. I still had school, work, and the looming weight of my family's expectations, but it was better. The twins' parents never made me feel like a burden. They asked how I was doing, listened without judgment, and made space for me in their already busy lives. It was the kind of care I'd always hoped for, but never dared to expect. Meanwhile, things at home were unraveling. My mom called several times, alternating between guilt-tripping and outright anger. "You can't just walk out," she said during one call. "This is your home." "It doesn't feel like home," I replied quietly. She didn't have an answer to that. Instead, she shifted to blaming the Carters, accusing them of interfering. It was easier for her to direct her frustration at them than to confront the reality of why it left. My dad eventually called too. His tone was more subdued, almost resigned. "Your mom's worried about you," he said. "I'm fine," I told him. "I just needed some space." He sighed. "You're still a kid, you know. Running away isn't the answer." "I didn't run away," I said, frustration bubbling up. I just needed to be somewhere I could breathe. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, he said, "All right, take care of yourself." And just like that, the conversation was over. The days turned into weeks, and I started to feel more like myself again. The Carters helped me map out a plan for the future, something I'd never thought was possible. Mr. Carter sat me down one evening with a stack of college brochures and a notebook. "Let's figure this out," he said, his voice steady and encouraging. We talked about scholarships, financial aid, and community colleges. It wasn't just about academics, it was about building a life I could be proud of. For the first time, I felt like my future wasn't just a blurry, unreachable concept. It was real, and it was mine to shape. Back at school, I finally opened up to one of my teachers, Mrs. Johnson. She had always been kind, and when she asked how I was doing one day, I found myself telling her the truth. She listened, her expression softening with every word. "You're stronger than you think," she said when I finished. "But you don't have to carry all of this alone." With her help, I connected with a school counselor who introduced me to resources I didn't even know existed. It felt strange to accept help, but it also felt good, like I was finally taking control of my life. One Saturday afternoon, as I was helping Mrs. Carter with some yard work, my mom showed up unannounced. She stood at the edge of the driveway, her arms crossed, and her face a mix of anger and exhaustion. Mrs. Carter noticed her first and gently nudged me. "I'll give you two some privacy," she said, retreating into the house. I walked over to my mom, my heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I came to take you home," she said firmly. I shook my head. "This is my home now." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw something raw and vulnerable beneath her usual bravado. "I'm your mother," she said, her voice breaking. "You can't just leave us." "I didn't leave," I said. "I just chose something better for myself. I'm tired of feeling like I don't matter. Here, I matter." She looked away, blinking back tears. "I didn't realize you felt that way," she admitted. "That's the problem," I said. Nobody realized. Nobody cared enough to ask. We stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "If this is what you need, I won't fight you on it. But I want to try. I want to fix things." "I'm not ready for that," I said honestly, "but maybe someday." She nodded again, her shoulders sagging. "Take care of yourself, okay?" "I will," I promised. She left without another word, and I watched her car disappear down the street. It wasn't the resolution it imagined, but it felt like a step, a small, hesitant step towards something better. As the weeks turned into months, I started to feel more grounded. I applied to a few colleges with the Carters' help and even managed to snag a small scholarship. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and for the first time, that felt like enough. My relationship with my parents remained distant, but there was a new sense of understanding between us. They didn't try to pull me back into their chaos, and I didn't shut them out completely. It was a fragile balance, but it worked. And as I stood on the threshold of my future, I realized something important. Family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who show up, who care, who make you feel seen and valued. For me, that was the Carters. They had given me the foundation I needed to build a life worth living, and for that, I would always be grateful. As I packed my bags for college, I thought about all the twists and turns that had brought me here. It hadn't been easy, and it wouldn't be easy moving forward. But I was ready. For the first time, I was ready to face whatever came next.